Ask most people how a fair tax system should work, and you'll hear something like this. People who earn more should pay a higher tax rate. That's the foundation of a progressive tax system. The more you make, the bigger the percentage you pay. Some argue for a flat tax where everyone pays the same rate. That sounds fair, at least on paper. But when we look at how our tax system actually works across all types of taxes, we don't see a progressive system. We don't even see a flat one. We see a regressive system where, to a surprising extent, the less you make, the more of your income goes to taxes. To understand how tax burdens really work, we're going to build a chart, one tax at a time. The y-axis is income groups, from the bottom 50% up to the top 1%. The x-axis is the total effective tax rate, how much of a person's income actually goes to taxes. Each tax type will be added in a different color as we go. But we're also going to include one more bar, off to the side, a special one. It represents the ultra-wealthy, those worth hundreds of millions or even billions. People who don't rely on a paycheck and often don't report much taxable income at all. Now, for most of us, tax rates are calculated as a percentage of what we earn. But for the ultra-wealthy, income is almost irrelevant. So instead, we use a more honest measure. How much tax they paid compared to how much their wealth grew. Some might argue, but wealth goes up and down. If the market drops, shouldn't they get credit for losses? And it's true, wealth can fluctuate. But when we talk about income, we're not just talking about paying the bills. The whole point of income is to build wealth over time. The ultra-wealthy just skip the income part entirely. They live by borrowing against their assets, so they can spend without ever triggering a taxable event. Their wealth continues to grow, mostly untouched by the tax system. That's why their effective tax rate is so low. Even if their net worth grows by billions, they might pay just a few million in taxes. Let's start with the most visible tax, the federal income tax. It's structured to be progressive, with tax brackets from 10 to 37%. So in theory, higher earners pay more. And it's true, the top 1% pay a large share of federal income taxes. But that's just one piece of the tax system. We're interested in the total burden across all taxes. As for the ultra-wealthy, they often report little to no income, so this tax barely applies. Next, we add payroll taxes, also called FICA. These fund Social Security and Medicare and apply to wage income up to a cap. If you earn $50,000, you pay the full 7.65%. If you earn $500,000, you stop paying after the first $168,000. That makes payroll taxes regressive, because as income rises, the percentage you pay goes down. The ultra-wealthy with no wages at all pay nothing. Now we add state and local taxes, mostly sales and excise taxes. These are flat and unavoidable. Everyone pays the same rate when they buy things like clothes, food, or services. But if you make $30,000, those purchases are a much bigger slice of your income than if you make $300,000. That's why state and local taxes are often the most regressive part of the tax system. And for the ultra-wealthy, who spend far less of their wealth, these taxes barely register. Next, property taxes. For middle-class households, your home is often your biggest asset and your biggest tax burden. But the ultra-wealthy hold most of their wealth in stocks, trusts, and private companies, not homes. So again, this tax barely touches them. Let's look at investment taxes on capital gains and dividends. These are taxed at lower rates than regular income, and only when assets are sold. But many ultra-wealthy people never sell. They borrow against growing assets instead, avoiding tax entirely. Some say, wait, don't the wealthy pay through corporate taxes? And it's true, companies pay taxes and wealthy people own companies. But today's corporate tax rate is 21%, and effective rates are often much lower. And corporate taxes don't fund Social Security, education, or local services. They don't reduce the wealthy's personal tax burden in any meaningful way. Some also might argue, isn't this all temporary? Won't the estate tax eventually catch up and reclaim some of this wealth? In theory, yes, the federal estate tax is supposed to apply a 40% tax on fortunes passed down to heirs. But in practice, that's not what's happening. Ultra-wealthy families often pay a fraction of that rate if they pay anything at all. Research shows that billionaires typically face an effective estate tax rate of around 8%, not 40%. That's because they use complex planning tools like grantor retained annuity trusts, dynasty trusts, and valuation discounts to legally shield most of their wealth from being taxed when they pass it on. And it works. More than half of the 100 richest Americans have used these trusts to sidestep estate taxes entirely. In 2020, only about 1,200 families paid estate taxes at all, contributing around $9 billion. That's a drop in the bucket compared to the trillions in generational wealth being passed down. So while the estate tax sounds like a safety net, for many of the wealthiest families, it's barely a speed bump. And if the final checkpoint isn't working, we have to ask, is this system really built to collect from the ultra-wealthy at all? Now zoom out and look at the full system. At the bottom, sales, payroll, and property taxes eat up huge portions of income. In the middle, income tax adds more. At the top, capital gains take over. But the very top, the ultra-wealthy, still barely pay. This is what we mean by regressive. Our tax system wasn't always like this. When the federal income tax was introduced in 1913, it was built on a simple principle. Those with greater ability to pay should contribute more. That's the foundation of a progressive tax system. Not as punishment for success, but as a way to fund public goods and ensure shared responsibility. But today, that system isn't living up to its purpose. Around 140,000 people in the U.S. have a net worth over $50 million. That's less than 0.05% of the population. But they control a substantial share of the nation's wealth. And to be clear, we're not talking about everyone who's wealthy. Many high earners, like athletes and entertainers, pay millions in taxes each year. That's because they're paid in taxable income, just like the rest of us. The real issue is with those whose wealth grows quietly through stocks, real estate, and private equity, often without ever generating taxable income. That's why several reform ideas have been proposed. A wealth tax, which would apply a small percentage to very large fortunes, a tax on unrealized gains, taxing asset growth even before it's sold, mark-to-market taxation, applying to tradable assets like stocks, and estate tax reforms, so inherited wealth isn't permanently untaxed. All of these have downsides. Valuing assets is hard. Enforcing them is complex. And yes, they'd be unpopular among those who would pay more. But here's the truth. Paying taxes always has a downside. No one wants to do it. But we all do because we believe in paying into the system that supports us. We can't keep putting off real solutions just because the people who benefit the most from the current system don't like the alternatives. If we want to address inequality, if we want to fund programs we all use, if we want to balance the budget, then we have to be willing to confront the fact that our tax system isn't just outdated, it's avoidable. And that avoidance comes at a cost to everyone else.